I think this is a good time to just go ahead and get started. Okay, good evening again. Okay, so you are all logged into the roundtable virtual discussion between deaf and hard of hearing adults. This is the second time that Virginia Hands and Voices has done this event. We had such a great success with the first one back in the summer of 2021 that we made a decision to do this again. We do have a new panel of people that are joining us this time. And I will, in just a minute, I am going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. And in case you didn't hear me, I'm going to say this again. We respectfully ask, if you are joining us, that you just go ahead and mute your microphones and turn your cameras off. We have a lot of questions that were submitted by you all, and we are going to tackle as many as we can. And if you feel like you have another question that you want to ask, feel free to, again, at the bottom of your screen in the chat box, to type in a question there. And I'm hoping that during the last 15 minutes of our meeting tonight that we can actually go through those questions. Okay. All right, so I will introduce myself first, and then we will move on to Hillary, Mitchell, and Trustee. My name is Jill Young, and I was diagnosed with severe to profound hearing loss when I was 1. I had a bacterial meningitis. My parents said that before that happened, I was talking in full sentences. And then I got sick, and then when I got better, it was another year before they realized that I had lost my hearing. So I grew up in a mainstream public school. I used hearing aids, and I was orally speaking and using my hearing aids. I did not have any kind of visual language. And I did use an FM system all the way through elementary school, all the way through high school. And then when I went to college, I made the decision to become an audiologist. And so I found my way out to Washington, D.C. and went to Gallaudet University, where I learned sign language. And I met my husband, and I stayed in Northern Virginia, and I'm now an audiologist. I'm a pediatric audiologist here in Northern Virginia. I've been one for 19 years now. And I am I think it's 5 or 6 years ago now, I was invited to be on the board for Virginia Hands and Voices, and I've loved every minute of it. I've loved being able to support parents, and it's been a great adventure for me. So I'm going to turn this over to Hillary, and I will let her talk next and introduce herself.
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone. My name is Hillary Franklin.
Hi everyone. My name is Hillary
It's a pleasure
Franklin.
to be here tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
I was born profoundly deaf.
I was born
My
profoundly
parents
deaf.
found out I was deaf.
My parents
was
found out I
9
was
months old.
deaf when I was 9 months
This
old,
is relatively early.
which is
for
relatively
that time.
early for that
Before
time.
newborn
It was before newborn hearing screening.
from birth to age 3.
From birth to age 3, I was oral,
Used the hearing aid and
using hearing aids
as much as I could.
and lip reading as much as I
And
could.
I was 3.5.
When I was
My
3 and a
parents
half,
realized I had some language delay.
my parents realized I had some language delay.
So they
So
had already heard about food speech.
they had already heard about cute
They
speech.
decided
So
to go with it because
they decided to go with it
the
because
language of the home was
it's the,
English.
you know, the language of the home was English.
Access to the English.
So they wanted me to have access to the English.
So I've been using food English since I was 3.5.
So I've been using Cute English since I was
I
3
did
and a
learn
half.
how to sign.
I did learn how to sign in middle school. Well, let me back up.
When I was 4, we moved to Maryland.
When I was 4,
I
we
was
moved to
mainstreamed.
Maryland and I was mainstreamed
London County Public Schools,
in Montgomery County Public
which has
Schools,
a 3-track program.
which
where
has a 3-track
elementary
program.
school
One elementary
uses
school
total communication.
uses total communication.
One elementary school
One
had
elementary
the oral
school
program.
had the oral
And
program,
the third school had
and the third school had the Cute Speech program.
So, so I was in the elementary school with
So I was
Cute
in the
Speech
elementary
program.
school with the Cute Speech program.
3 schools back into the same middle school.
All 3 schools fed into
it
the
was
same middle
there
school. So it was there
that I learned to sign
that I learned to sign
from that peers.
from
who
deaf
signed.
peers who signed.
So this means I'm
So this means I'm oral
active
I cute, and I
am
sign.
fluent as well. Today I now work as a writer
Today I work as a
editor
writer
at the Department of Defense.
and an editor for the Department of Defense.
I'm also involved with advocacy.
I'm also
But
involved
at
with
work,
advocacy, both at
in
work
my personal life.
and in my personal life.
I'm on the board of directors of the National Cute Speech Association.
I'm on the board of directors for the National Cute Speech Association.
If you have any follow-up questions,
So if you have any
related to
follow-up
cue, I'm
questions
more than happy to answer them.
related to queuing, I'm
Thank
more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
This is Jill. We're going to go to Mitchell next.
Okay, well, this is Mitchell. Thank you for having me, Jill. A little bit about myself. I was born in Northern California with a severe to profound hearing loss, and I was born and raised there for most of my life. And I wasn't diagnosed with my hearing loss until I was almost 3 years old. So I was born before early intervention. And my parents had enrolled me in an oral deaf preschool. It had just opened, and I was in the very first class, and I grew up using hearing aids. And then later on, I was mainstreamed into medical kindergarten, went through public school, all through high school, and later came to University of Virginia, all the way from California. And while I was a student there, that's when I decided to get a cochlear implant in one ear. So I've been a user of, hearing and talking for my entire life, and I continue to do so in my adult life. And my wife and I live in Williamsburg.
Thank you, Mitchell. Okay, Tressie.
Hello, my name is Tressela Bateson. I currently work for RID, the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. I am responsible for the ethical practices system. So should there be a grievance filed against a specific interpreter who is, maybe their behavior is not up to par with the code of ethics, watch your P's and Q's, interpreters. The deaf world tends to be small. And so, Mitchell and Hillary, I feel like I can relate to both of you. I went to my daughter goes to UVA, and I did some grad school work where you went, Hillary. So it's just, it's a beautiful community, and we are all connected. So I grew up in a fully hearing world, and then I had meningitis for when I was 8. I was in a coma for an extended period of time, months. There was no idea if I would wake up from it or not. When I did wake from my coma, I was profoundly deaf. My family, we were a small community in West Virginia. There were no resources where I was. So, I went to the same school I'd been going to, and I was the only deaf person there in my school. I had speech therapy once a week. And that the focus at that time was really focusing on continuing my speech. My hearing loss is 100%. There was a thought that I could use hearing aids at one point, but it did not make any difference. It just gave me a squeak. So I remember people preaching at me to use this hearing aid, but it really didn't work for me. And my family noticed that, I tried, I'm an outgoing, assertive kind of person. I was in a small school where I'd already known everyone. So I was behaving as if nothing had changed. And the way that I was navigating this was really just by reading everything. So I would read books, I would read signs, I would just really pick up on all of that. But I was really not able to socialize in the way that I wanted to. I could certainly speak for myself fine, but I couldn't hear a response. And that was frustrating both to me and others. I moved to Virginia for a job opportunity. And also my parents thought that there would be, my parents moved here and they also thought there would be better schooling for me. I went to a mainstream school. I did have that FM system, but again, this technology, really, I still didn't have access to communication still. There was a young girl in my class though, who I saw finger spelling. And I was like, what is this visual communication? And so I started getting just really interested in sign. And then my sophomore year of high school, I transferred to MSSD, the Model Secondary School for the Deaf, which is connected to the Gallaudet. And I learned sign there. And at that point, my world just opened up. It made a world of difference. My family also at that point started learning sign. Both my brother and my sister sign. My mother's actually an interpreter. My nieces and my nephews sign, and I feel very blessed and fortunate to have that communication that they've learned from me.
This is Jill. Thank you, Tracy. I'm giving the interpreters a chance to switch here. Okay. All right, so we're going to go right into asking a series of questions that I hope will flow really well. And the first thing that we're going to start with is talking about early intervention. So the question is, when you were little, were you enrolled in an early intervention program? And if you were, did you find that it was beneficial, or did you find that your parents thought it was really beneficial to have early intervention services? So who wants to start? Hillary.
Fortunate to understand.
So the first thing to understand, I was born in the late 70s. I'm dating myself here.
There was really not much in the way of early intervention.
There was really not much in the way of early intervention back then. I did have a teacher at the deaf assigned to my caseload, or I was assigned to her caseload.
From age 1.5 to 4, I lived in Connecticut.
Age 1.5 to 4, I lived in Connecticut.
I
was a teacher of the deaf. I went to here in Connecticut, and that was all I had.
One itinerant teacher.
One itinerant teacher.
We moved to Maryland.
When I was 4, we moved to Maryland and Northern Virginia, by the way. We moved to Maryland.
And I was enrolled into the preschool.
I was enrolled into the preschool program at the elementary school with the queuing program, which exposed me to other deaf peers who queued around my age, some younger.
Services and others.
So I've had full services since I was 4. That was as early intervention was back then.
So, but I did have was beneficial.
So what I did have was
First 2 to 3
beneficial.
years, I have no memory of.
The first 2 to 3 years I have no memory of.
I do
I was
have
too young,
memories of teacher
but I do
and
have memories of
the
preschool
age onward
and
and
age 4
the be
onward,
around other deaf peers.
and just being around other deaf peers who
The
cued
immediate
was
visual access.
just immediate for language access.
I can go next. This is Mitchell. You know, in California, when I was born, they didn't have an official early intervention program. They didn't have, you know, newborn hearing screening. So, which is why I was diagnosed when I was 3 years old. But so, you know, my parents had to do all of the heavy lifting on their own, you know, and you know, we were outside the Sacramento area, so we were fortunate. It was a large populous city, so we, you know, they explored all of the different options. You know, they explored you know, sign language option in the San Francisco Bay Area. They explored a total communication option, and then they discovered the oral deaf school that had just opened. And you know, I grew up in a hearing family. Everybody, you know, all of their friends were hearing. All of my extended family was hearing, and they just decided that the oral deaf option was the best route.
This is Jill. I'm a lot like Mitchell. I grew up in a hearing family, and I don't recall really having early intervention, but I do remember when I was about 3 that I would go to 2 different preschools. I would go to a mainstream public preschool in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I would go to a preschool that was more for, I guess it was more for kids with disabilities, and it wasn't necessarily kids with hearing loss, but kids with other disabilities. And I remember that just being what helped me catch up. In other words, that it gave me the extra services that I need, so that by the time I started kindergarten, I had pretty much been through 4 years of preschool within 2 years. And so I went into mainstream kindergarten, just having that in my pocket. So I know that that helped me a lot. Okay, go on. Let's go on to the next one. Did you have an IEP, an individualized education plan, or a 504 plan when you were in school? And if you did, what types of support worked well for you? And then what do you wish you had had on your IEP or your 504 that you did not have?
I can kick us off. This is Mitchell. Yes, I did have an IEP, and I just a few of the things that worked for me. You know, I had an FM system that worked really well for me. I used that all through high school. You know, from first grade through high school. You know, 12th grade. And then there's a lot of just really simple things that helped a lot. You know, sit in the front of the classroom, you have a conference with the teachers in the beginning of the year. These are the sorts of things that, you know, Mitchell might need help with. You know, other simple things, you know, if the teacher plays a video, make sure there's closed captioning. If there's not, find a transcript, that sort of thing. That's what I can think of and remember.
Yeah, I don't remember captions really coming out until, excuse me, I'm sorry, this is Jill. I don't remember coming out until the 90s and maybe 2000s. And so before 90s.
It was earlier,
At
Seth
86
Hillary.
to 88.
I think it was
Well,
like 88.
Okay, well, I guess growing up, captions weren't available for me when watching videos at school. And I'm sure it was the same thing for Hillary too. Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, but I didn't have that.
This is Hillary.
This is Hillary. That's the interesting thing. Growing up in Montgomery County, Maryland, with such a huge deaf population, I was lucky.
This is why I remember when
This is why I remember when Captions came out. The first movie I ever watched with captions was Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
So that was my first
accessible movie.
It's a good one too.
It was a good one too.
Anyway, so I've had an IEP
plan. I've had an IEP plan since, for the equivalent since pre-K.
I saw my IEPs.
I saw all of my IEPs from late elementary school through high school.
Middle school, I had the option to attend my IEP meetings.
I had the option to attend my IEP meetings. I declined.
I preferred to be in class.
I preferred to be in class.
But in high school,
we were all required to attend our IEP meeting. So those were often scheduled for after school.
Not in class.
We were not in class. So
it was good to see. It
was good. It was good to be able to provide the input
and but I didn't
know what I needed and what I didn't. So,
in elementary school,
for example, in elementary school, we all automatically were assigned a resource teacher, like a resource period. If we needed extra help with work, in my fourth grade, I didn't need that.
That was resource
time, so it was removed. So all I needed were translators in the classroom and for any extracurricular activities, as well as a note taker. Because when you're deaf, you can't look at someone and take notes and write at the same time.
But I would have laptops heard back then. Hard technology did not
become available until college.
Jessie.
Hello. So wow, when you all talk about captioning, I remember the first time that big brown box, that machine that you could get from Sears. It's so different now. Now it's embedded and built into the technology we use, but technology really is a beautiful thing to see that change. So when I moved to Virginia, my IEP just meant I went to regular classes. I used the hearing assistance, but it really wasn't able to meet my needs. I could express myself, but I couldn't really receive any of the spoken communication. And that was my experience in school until I learned sign language. And then I was finally able to access language from others. At home, watching the TV, my mom would use kind of some shorthand. She would write down what the conversation was, what was happening, kind of summarize everything for me. I should have saved that from the house when we were young. It was kind of like our low-tech captioning that we used back then. I wish that I had had the opportunity to learn sign language earlier, and then there would have been opportunities for my family and my parents to learn sign language. But at the time, there wasn't any of that available. It wasn't until high school that I started to learn. My parents didn't really have any options to learn sign language as part of my plan, and there weren't any sign language classes. I just had to learn from my friends and learn from other peers. I would go to the theater, see everyone on stage, and learn from that. It was kind of sink or swim to pick up the language that way. So I certainly wish that there had been that opportunity. Like today, parents can maybe go to community college and take a sign language class, but sometimes that option isn't presented and available to families.
Let's let the interpreters switch if they want to. I wanted to just mention for a minute here that if you are currently a parent of a child with an IEP or a 504 plan for school.
Sorry, could I call a timeout? I'm not able to see the interpreter.
Okay, let's fix this.
Okay, this is Janina. I'm gonna try to figure out what happened. Everyone dropped
Okay.
off, right?
Okay,
All the
thank you.
spotlights dropped off. Everyone's coming back?
Hooray.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. If you are a parent, getting those IEPs right is important today. There's a boatload of resources out there, and I just want to tell you as parents that when you make your IEP plan, you really need to make sure that your school is following the IEP plan. So whatever you decide, if you don't know how to make an IEP or you don't know what to put in an IEP, there are people that can help you figure that out. And you finding out what all your options are and getting the advocacy that you need just from whoever you can find is really important. And I want to make sure that you as parents know that you've got to make sure your school is following the IEP plan, because your kid might not know. They might not know what the plan is. And if anything is missing, they may not be able to tell you. So yes, Hillary.
I just really quickly want to add.
I really quickly want to add, as a parent, you are not required to sign the IEP until you're satisfied with it. Do not let the school force you.
It is your right.
It's illegal.
Not acceptable and not signed.
It's not. It's your right not to sign if it's not acceptable. You have that right.
Right. Okay. Yeah, very important. Don't sign an IEP if you don't like it, if you're not satisfied with it. I agree. Who would you reach out to get that advocacy? Well, I mean, I know the National Virginia Hands and Voices website has some, I see somebody here, so Laura Yellen said she'd be happy to help too, but also the National Hands and Voices website, I believe has some really good resources too. I forgot their website name. I'm sure Janina or Terry or somebody can find it for me. We can put it in the comment box. So just want to throw that out there. Okay, all right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, this is advocacy. So what age did you start advocating for yourself? And how can parents really empower their kids to learn how to advocate for themselves? Anyone?
I could speak to that.
Jessie?
So when I became deaf, I didn't actually realize I was deaf. So I certainly didn't know that I needed to advocate for myself, but I am a very stubbornly inquisitive person. Once I want something, I make sure I get it. That's just the kind of personality I have. So I really look for opportunities and grab them. When it came to my hearing loss, I think I really learned about how to advocate for myself when I was in high school, when I met peers who had this similar experiences, other deaf people, whether or not they signed, just kind of making those connections with peers and understanding how they advocated for themselves if they were to miss something really helped me. I grew up with a bit of a temper. I would have fits if I didn't get my way. And so I had to kind of learn how to manage that to become an advocate. When I was in college, I went to Seaside University in Northridge, and all the interpreters in my class, and this was a fairly large deaf population. So the other deaf students taught me how to request interpreters, and really how to advocate for myself within that program. So yeah, I think learning from deaf peers has really been a huge part of my self-advocacy journey.
This is Mitchell. I tried to recall when I first started advocating for myself, and I think it was really it centered around that FM system, because I had to, even at a very young age, be responsible for making sure it was charged and so on. And really, my parents did a very good job of basically forcing me to stand up for myself when I needed it. If I went to a friend's house, a movie night, what have you, my mom would ask me, well, are you going to ask them to put closed captioning on? And I'd say, maybe I should. And it's just a childhood, growing up that way with my parents' support, I think just instilled that naturally for me.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same boat, Mitchell. The FM system, I mean, it just, I knew that I heard better with it than I did without it. And I was able to recognize that from a really early age, that as, embarrassing as it was for me to need some additional help that nobody else needed, I was able to say, this benefits me. And I definitely just had that drive to want to hear better than to not hear better. So I also wanted to mention here along the lines of advocacy, again, for parents. I work with a lot of parents, and I think it's really important, in helping your child learn how to advocate for themselves, that you as a parent have to know what all their options are. And I just want to say, you've got to, as a parent, you've got to learn everything you can about hearing loss and hearing aids and cochlear implants and all the different ways that you can connect them, which, as Mitchell and I were talking about, one way is with an FM system. And there's also other ways to connect devices. And so I really wanted to just mention to parents, help advocate for your kids, because they don't know what they're missing. And let's just say you have a kindergartner and who is going to school. He doesn't know that there are FM options or closed captioning, and there's things out there that they may not know about. So as a parent, I want to kind of really try to encourage you to learn what those options are, and to make sure that you actually sit down with your kid and that you actually say, do you know that this exists? Because even a kindergartner, I think, can tell you what's working and what's not working. So I wanted to, make sure that you all know that you've got to really keep that line of communication open with your kids, and making sure that you know what the resources are that are available to them. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. And I see Hillary is trying to talk. So Hillary.
No, no, it's fine.
No, it's fine.
Uh,
This is Hillary.
Everything you say is absolutely true.
Everything you're saying is absolutely true.
But I think sometimes parents,
But I think sometimes parents or
forget
adults forget is that kids
so if you have
observe a
captions on
lot.
the
So
TV
if you
at
have
home,
captions on your TV
and
at
then
home,
the captions at home,
and they don't
They will
receive
ask.
captions at school, they will ask.
they will notice the
They
difference.
will notice the difference.
Don't assume
So
that
don't
your kids are
assume
not
that your
aware,
kids
but
are
do
not
make
aware,
sure
but
that
do
they are aware of
make
the
sure that they're aware that there's captions.
That's just wanted to point that out.
I just wanted to point that out because for me,
I had a different experience really
I had a different experience growing up.
I was in school.
I was in school, this is plural,
I had an average of
that had an average of 20 to 30 deaf
every year.
students every year.
Yeah.
So my
elementary
grade
school,
in elementary
there
school,
were about
there were about
in my year.
4 of us in my year.
In this
overall.
school,
Overall in the
about
school
20 to
total,
30.
we had about
students.
20 to 30
what
deaf
this
students.
meant
What this
teachers
meant,
and staff
was that teachers and
learned to
staff
realize that we're not the same.
learn to realize that we're
But
not all the same either. Just because 2 people are
they have
deaf
the same needs.
does not mean they have the same needs.
And we recognize that as well.
So we
Some
recognize
people
that as
have more
well.
hearing,
Some people
have
have
less
more
hearing.
hearing. Some have less hearing.
some prefer to use their voice.
Some
do
prefer to use
not.
voice, some do
We
not.
learned early these days.
We learned all of
Just
these
by being
things
in this
just by
community
being in
of
this
deaf people.
community of deaf people.
So for me, that's how I learned to advocate.
So for me, that's
And
how I learned to
recognize
advocate.
that we were
I
all different and
recognized that we were all
need
different
to speak up,
and that we all need to speak
so
up,
to speak.
you know,
for
so to
ourselves.
speak, for ourselves.
This is Jill. When I was looking at this question, I was trying to think of a time when I did not advocate for myself, when I should have. And all I can think of is just, and I'm sure the panelists will agree with me on this, that I think about all the times that a teacher or somebody in the class said something and I missed it. And I was too afraid to ask for repetition. And I was thinking to myself, you know, how do we teach kids today to not be afraid to advocate for themselves in that manner, that we don't want to be embarrassed, but there's got to be kind of a way that, you know, we have to learn at some point, right, to ask people to repeat themselves. Am I right with you panelists? Is that something that not just me? Right. So I was going to say, because this was one of the questions that a parent brought up.
I can, yes. You know, the problem is sometimes I don't know what I've missed because I don't have any receptive language in terms of hearing. I only get it visually. So I remember like a spelling test, you know, I didn't have a way, I had to lip read the teacher and I was like, I don't know what word, because lip reading is just not a reliable mode of communication because again, no technology really worked for me. I'm not a candidate for a cochlear implant. And so sometimes, you know, I just had to memorize like a list of spelling words. And that was my way to get beyond that. You know, so if the teacher were speaking and I was like, I'm not even going to look and see what word she's saying, I'm just going to go from the list I've memorized. So finally, when I was able to get interpreters, you know, when I was old enough to know, then I would say, hey, can you say that again? Like if I were taking notes or looking for something. But when I was young, I didn't even know I was missing things, just to speak to your point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I was just thinking about that, I was thinking, give your kids a safe place to be able to say things like that and to talk about those, because those weigh heavily. And it's not fun to miss things. And so, parents and teachers out there, if you feel like a kid is missing something and not getting it all, give them a safe place to get that information that maybe you think they missed or something like that. So I want to kind of move on a little bit here. I have a couple more questions. Hopefully we can kind of go through these real quick. Tell us about a time that you had a best friend and something that stood out about that friendship, or did you have any siblings with hearing loss, without hearing loss, and how did you guys navigate that? Hillary? We'll wait for them to switch.
Yes. When I was in elementary school,
When I was in elementary school, a lot of my classmates learned to cue as well.
One of those classmates today.
One of those
We've been friends
classmates
since
still cues today.
And she fluently
Learned in
today.
kindergarten, she
We've been
can still
friends
cue
this year.
fluently today because we've been friends all these years.
One of her best friends has a brother who's also deaf.
One of her brother has a best friend who's also deaf and cues. So
They would hang out together.
we would all hang out together. But
But
her learning to cue and stick with it was something I always appreciated all these years.
And I have no siblings. So
And I have no siblings, so my friends are my siblings.
Right, Trustee.
This is Tressie speaking. So when I moved to Virginia from West Virginia, I went and started elementary school. It was a mainstream school. And I met a hearing girl who taught me finger spelling, and she was my best friend. She was kind of the only one that I was able to communicate with through elementary school and middle school. And then in high school, we moved to different schools, and I felt really lost without her. We would spell back and forth using finger spelling, and that's how we communicated. And we really lost touch when we moved to separate schools in high school. But we would go to softball games, swimming, we did everything together. Unfortunate that we lost touch. A few years ago, because of Facebook, we were able to connect again. And I found out that she lives in Maryland, so kind of close by. We got in touch, we met up. She speaks very clearly, so I was able to lip read some. It can be more easy or challenging to lip read depending on the speaker. She remembered the finger spelling, so we could use that. And she found out later that she had been adopted. And I looked back and I always remember her family, her sister, her parents. She was the oldest one, and she had found out that she was adopted. And she found out that her birth mother was actually deaf, and never knew that when we were friends, when we were young. And that really gave me chills, goosebumps when I learned that. Like, what a thing for her to learn to be able to communicate with other people and not even realizing that about her deaf mother. So definitely that's a special friend that I've had in my life.
Hi, this is Mitchell. The only thing I'll mention here is I just remembered that in elementary school, especially, my mom, at the beginning of each school year, she would come to the class and give a presentation on, to all the little kids, here are what hearing aids are, here's, she would bring the little, audiologist tool that looks like a stethoscope, where you can hook it up to the hearing aid and the audiologist can hear what it sounds like. And she would have all of the kids do that, and that kind of dispelled any of the strangeness associated with hearing aids, and that just made it easier for me to make friends.
I love that idea, Mitchell. This is Jill. I think that's great. I can remember doing that for myself, was having to get up in front of the class and talk about my FM system and why the teacher was wearing a special microphone you know, in front of the whole class. So I kind of had to do something similar. All right, we are kind of on our last 10 minutes here, and I want to make sure that we answer some of the questions that our attendees asked us. So I have a few here that I'm just going to kind of spit out, and we'll see if anybody wants to answer them. Do any of you want to talk about any ideas that you might have for parents to help their kid feel more, you know, included at school? And I kind of, this is kind of what Mitchell answered a little bit too, but are there any other ideas? Jesse?
This is Tressie. So my school did a great thing later on. So they would have picnics at the school for all the deaf children to come together. So, you know, for the other children could come as well, but it was really an opportunity to socialize outside of school because it can be very lonely sometimes. If you're the only person who signs in your classroom, if you don't necessarily have communication access with the other students in your class, if your friends live further away and don't go to your school. So they would host picnics in the summertime, and that was a really great way for students to have that opportunity to socialize during breaks or holidays.
Hillary?
Hillary here. I agree with that completely. I mean, like I said before, I grew up in school with other deaf students. I consider myself extremely lucky to have grown up in that environment, by hearing peers and deaf peers. So I never felt isolated. I'll be honest, I feel bad for deaf children who were the only ones in their school or community. Deaf children really do need deaf role models.
It's an identity.
It's an identity issue.
Deaf children need to
Deaf
see
children
adults who are
need
like
to
them.
see deaf adults who are like them.
Okay, here's a question. How does choosing a communication method affect your child being able to learn a foreign language? Hillary?
I saw the question and
I saw this question on the list. I was really excited about it. For those who are not that familiar with doing what I'm doing, it's phonemic. It's consonant vowel based. So I'm literally doing what I'm saying. It's all consonants and vowels. So this means transliterators are not interpreting from one language to another. They are showing English visually. This means because it's consonant vowels, they can also cue other languages, Arabic, Hebrew, Spanish, French, what have you. So when I was in high school, I took Latin. In college, I took Spanish. And the translators I had did not know Latin or Spanish. They just heard the consonants and vowels and viewed them. I was the one learning the language. My deaf peers who signed had a more difficult time figuring out the accessibility because signing in ASL. So how do we show Spanish or French in another language? That's a difficult question.
So I'm a big fan of
fan of cueing for that reason.
I like that. Thank you, Hillary. Okay, I have two other questions here.
This is Tressie, just with a quick comment.
Oh, sure.
So I think that the communication method, you have to really look at the whole child and what is the possibility for them. For example, for myself, I wasn't a candidate for cochlear implants, and hearing assistants like an FM system or a hearing aid weren't going to work for me. And I could speak. I had that expressive language, but I couldn't access language if it was spoken, and I needed that visual language to be able to access it. I didn't want to, you don't want to wait and see, is this method going to work? Is this one going to work? Can they access spoken language? Sign language is always going to be accessible, and then they can always learn cued later, but you don't want them to miss that window of critical language development at that young age to make sure that they have access from 0 to 3 when you don't know yet if they're going to be able to access that spoken language. It's so important to make sure they have access to a visual language like ASL, and I really strongly advocate for accessing that language and tracking the child's language development in those early years.
Okay. I have room for two more questions. What is something you wish your parents knew?
Well,
I think I wish they knew where to get help.
Hillary here.
So
My
parents are both researchers. So when they found out I was deaf, the first thing they did was go to the library. So by the time I was old enough to learn for myself, they already knew a lot. The reason my parents did not go with ASL is they knew it was another language, and they didn't want to risk language delay. They did not know how to sign. And for parents to be language models for their kids, they have to be fluent in that language already. The language of the home should be the language the child has access to, in theory. So whether you're learning ASL or learning cued English, or using oral, speech reading, and hearing support approach, whatever you do, make sure you're all in. There's no part-time communication. It has to be full-time. My parents got that, thankfully. And I have friends whose parents did not, unfortunately.
This is Jill. I wish that my parents had had a support group for parents. I don't think it existed when I was growing up, and I wish they had somebody that could have just met with them and told them that everything was going to be okay. When they were worrying about me and my future and what was going to happen to me, I wish that somebody had just been there for them to tell them it's going to be okay. And I say that because it doesn't matter what communication method you choose, it's going to work out for you. And the method that you choose is what's going to be the right method for you and your family. And I know my parents did that for me. They chose what they thought was the right thing for me. And I have no regrets about that. I'm very happy I flourished, and I know they were able to see that. I wish the parent support group had been there. So if you are a parent of a kid with hearing loss and you don't have a support group, I hope you can find one, because I think that's really important for you. In order to be able to support your own kid, you need to be supporting yourself. So you know, hearing loss builds grit and it builds survival. And I think those of us that had to go through hard things, we learned how to get through it, and we're going to be able to survive and get through hard things later in life. So I just would recommend to you parents now, make sure you've got somebody in your corner. Anybody else? Is there something, let me do one more question. What do you like about, what's your favorite part about being deaf or hard of hearing?
This is a funny one. This is Mitchell. I can lip read. Nobody else I know that can do that. So that's just my little quirk.
I like sleeping through the night and not being woken up by sounds.
Hotel rooms especially. I mean, all my hearing friends say they're so noisy and they can't sleep. So yeah, elevators are beeping, people are walking down the hall. I sleep right through it. Fantastic. But just to add to that, I have none, you know, being deaf is all I've ever known. I was born deaf. So, you know, it's part of my identity. I wouldn't be the same person I am today if I weren't deaf. So I kind of like it.
Anybody else? Okay. Oh,
This is Tressie. So like right now I have 4 puppies that I'm fostering here. And during the meeting, they've been running around, they've been making noise, they've been barking, but I can just watch without hearing them, without it distracting me. That's definitely a deaf gain. Now they're sleeping, so.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you. Your insight was really helpful. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And also to the transliterators and to the interpreters, and also our captioner. I forgot to mention Melanie doing our captioning tonight. You guys, thank you. I appreciate this. And thank you all to the wonderful comments that I'm seeing come up over here on the chat box, to all of you that attended this